We are in the eighth week already, wow, of a 9-week series on wholeness and the Enneagram. And for those of you who are new to the Enneagram, this Enneagram is this ancient system of sacred psychology that is foundationally spiritually based. So we're going to look at it from the sort of more superficial personality perspective, but then take a deep dive underneath that to explore how is it that understanding the personality system helps us to spiritually wake up or evolve and come into a greater knowing of our wholeness. So from a unity perspective, we are all already intrinsically whole. We teach here that not an original sin, but an original blessing. This idea that you were born fundamentally whole and perfect. And the spiritual path is not about perfecting yourself, but about waking up, removing the filters, the barriers to the awareness of your innate wholeness, perfection, worth, and lovability. And so today we take one particular focus on the Enneagram, which is the orientation of type 2. And we look at how when you're habitually oriented to that aspect of consciousness, you have a certain set of delusions around your own wholeness and well-being. And so the path of sort of uncovering that helps you to awaken to what is already true about you. So in pondering and thinking about today, I remembered a story about a woman who had this dream. She slept one night and had this dream. And in the dream, she walks into this small room. And in the room, there is kind of a small rectangular table. And on the table is this exquisite, long-stemmed red rose. And she looks at the rose, and she's just stunned by its beauty. And she finds herself wondering, whose rose is that? And as she looks at the rose, this realization dawns on her that that rose is for me. But in that moment, she actually feels terror. She feels like this sense of something terrible and blasphemous is going on by that recognition. And she wakes up frightened and afraid. When I first heard this story, I remember connecting to this part in me that wants to be special, so wants to feel like, for me, right? That's mine. Oh, yeah, I'm special. That's, that feeling when you get the special gift. And at the same time, whether through just our cultural upbringing around being important or special, this ickiness around, I shouldn't be that important. And as I kind of feel into that part of me that feels both the hope, but also the terror and the sense of blasphemy that, for me. So John A. Sanford, in his book, The Kingdom Within, the inner meaning of Jesus' sayings, shares this story about the woman and her dream. And the way he interprets it psychologically is that this rose represents the woman's fulfillment and her wholeness. Fulfillment and her wholeness that is uniquely hers. And in this moment, the woman, he says, experiences that sense of guilt, this guilt-ridden sense of whenever I think of something that's for me, there's a sense of, I don't deserve this. And so in this, he brings up the issue of how each of us is given at birth, before birth, essentially this rose, our wholeness, our uniqueness. And yet, all of us in some way say no to it. And instead of kind of embracing something intrinsic, we step into this, well, I'm going to become whole, valuable through a certain way. Most of us are able to at least own that we want to be special. So I'll go around the Enneagram and explore that. So we take a look at, say, the 9 on the Enneagram. The 9 has a special identity around being, ironically, the easygoing, peaceful one, the harmonious, I get along with everyone. And because I do, that makes me special. I get along better than all of you get along, right? The 8 can often feel extra important and valued because it's powerful, it's in control, and it can protect others, right? So the 1, I'll kind of sit on the top of the Enneagram. The 1, I identify with a type 1, often relates to, this desire to feel special by being perfect, by being good, acting good enough, and feeling it that way. I'll skip the 2 for now and come back to it. The 3 on the Enneagram feels the sense of worth by becoming successful. Look at what I can achieve. Look at what I have achieved, right, for the 3. The 4 on the Enneagram actually kind of does a reverse flip. That's like, I'm special because I'm uniquely wounded. That somehow in my suffering, that I stand out. I stand out as broken. So I get attached to my brokenness as a way of actually, ironically, trying to find my wholeness and sense of meaningfulness. The 5, knowledge, competency. I will be special and specially valuable because I am competent, because I know things that you don't know. I have expertise. And the 6 on the Enneagram can often relate to being the loyal one, right? The loyal friend, stalwart, in its way of showing up in the world, protecting others by its vigilance in looking for threats to its loved one as well as to itself. And then the 7 on the Enneagram is like, woohoo, I'm the fun one. I can entertain. And the challenge of that, of course, is I get hooked into this identity where I can't even let myself feel my pain because I'm so hooked into an identity that makes me special. This is how I feel the sense of I've got the rose, that fun. So we go around the Enneagram in that way. And so all the Enneagram types have a way in which it seeks to have the experience of being special through something outside itself. But only the type 2 has a kind of catch-22 around the path that it chose. If we look at the childhood kind of wound of the 2, each type can be said to have lost sight in childhood of a message. And the message for the 2 is that you are wanted. Just for who you are wanted. Now imagine if you don't know this as a child, if you don't know that you're just valuable and wanted without having to do a single thing. The 2 devises a strategy. I'm going to be especially needed. I'm going to be useful to you. So in lieu of being just intrinsically wanted, because I'm whole and perfect and valuable, I will become valuable by being needed. But in the development of that identity and structure, what do? I start to shut down my awareness of my own needs, right? So I don't even know that it's not just my needs for food. If you're hungry, it's not just my need to, watch a certain kind of movie. Well, if you want to watch that movie, but it's actually even my need to be aware of needs. So there's a sense in which the blocking of needs becomes so compulsive and great that you ask a 2 what it needs, and there's a blank look in the beginning. Until they start a conscious spiritual journey, it's like, what do you mean? I don't need a thing. I'm not aware, I'm not dependent on it, and of course everybody has needs. So why is this a personality that can't even see that? Well, if my core identity, who I am, depends on being able to monitor the needs of those that I deem special, and then meet those needs, so someday, maybe unconsciously, I think my needs will be met. If that's my life strategy, no way can I look inside. I have to constantly be aware of what you need. And I'm so well versed in it. Like, I forget to turn that awareness in here. And so when I first turn in here, it's like lostness. I can't even find where those needs got shoved down, right? So what happens is we develop the personality type 2, sometimes known as the giver, the helper on the Enneagram. The type 2 has these wonderful gifts because generally in the world, these are the folks that run my Unite service. They are the volunteers. They are the first to step up, right? They're the folks who are the first to, serve in the community. And they are so proactively monitoring your needs that they meet your needs even before you know that you had that need, right? Like they know you're hungry before you know you're hungry. This amazing sort of awareness and attentiveness to the other. So 2s are other-oriented. But on the little bit, so in the healthy 2s are the most compassionate, generous, naturally just empathetic and sympathetic folks of the Enneagram. But when they start to get unhealthy, more and more needs get squashed and not met, then, and people aren't cooperating, 2s on the negative end can start to be manipulative. And it can start to do a little backwards, kind of complaining, if you will, about its needs, but in a way where it's criticizing you, but really it's because you're not meeting its needs, right? The needs of that type. And so deception, manipulation, controlling, being possessive of those special somebodies, because 2s don't always, and generally 2s aren't necessarily generous to everyone. They're generous to the people that they believe will give them that sense of validation and identity, the select others. And so when that's not working, the 2s can get very desperate in sort of its ploy for manipulation, if you will. And so these are some of the issues that arise. But for us here, we never look at these qualities as a way of damning or condemning people. We look at them merely as unskillful strategies for getting our needs met. We have compassion for the ways that each and every type unskillfully seeks to get its needs met in the outer world. So we start with a lot of gentleness and compassion, for the ways in which the 2ness that can live in every single one of us. The part of us that abandons ourselves and thinks that if only I meet their needs, one day they will do something in return for me and I will get my needs met. Or maybe I don't need the same need met as that person, but my need for validation, my need for a sense of worth is going to be met. So we can all connect with that part in us that seeks that and start to have compassion for, let's compassionately look at now when I give to get. Not always the same thing I give. When do I give to get validation? When do I give to get a sense of my own worth or worthiness? When am I giving a dozen roses because I just want that one rose just desperately, right? And so as we sink into that for the 2, we learn that the Enneagram is this powerful map of consciousness that helps us to see how a 2 can integrate. So on this map, the 2 has an arrow going to 4. So let's talk about the qualities of the point 4. So we've learned that the 4, the qualities of the point 4 can often be called the soul child of the 2. And that's the part of the 2 that's repressed. Now, the qualities of the type 4, 2s are other referencing. They know what other people want and need before they do. Fours, on the other hand, always know what they feel and what they need. Fours are self-referencing. They have that gift. Now imagine the two that's habituated to believing that I am a selfless and generous human being. So when I look over at 4, I'm like, oh, I don't want to be that. They're self-centered. They're thinking about what they need. Like, that's the last thing I want. And yet, not surprisingly, that's exactly the path of integration for the two, to own the parts that initially look selfish. And you know what? Here's the issue. Here's the issue that every two faces. If you have repressed these parts of you since childhood, they have not grown up. So whereas a healthy 4 might have a very healthy sense of self in the world, the unhealthy 4 is what shows up initially in the 2. It's like radical selfish. Me. It's like you're looking over there, you're like watching how many cookies Johnny got, and I didn't. You know, how come the minister's hugging all of them and I'm the one who did all the volunteer work, you know? Like, that's the part of the 2 that is first owning, oh my goodness. Like, if I own, like, I want something, oh, it looks bitter, spiteful, and resentful at first. And so with gentleness, again, whether we are to have a 2 wing like I do, or supporting 2s in our lives, we have compassion for the ways in which their immediate response to their growth and integration is to think that what they're doing is extraordinarily selfish. The things that we take for granted, like, oh, I'll take time for myself and go to the gym to take care of my body. Oh, maybe I'll take the first bite of the cake. You know, the things that most of us might be like, of course, and that they're like, I would never do that. I won't take the last bite, I won't take the first bite. In fact, I won't eat cake, you know? Like, and so, and it's just getting how hard that is for a 2 to admit that it needs or wants anything. That's like a kind of annihilation. And so we embrace the qualities of the 4, and in doing so, what happens? Well, the beauty of the 4 is the type 4, and we'll learn more about 4s next week as we talk about the 4's integration point. The type 4, in being so grounded in selfhood, has this richness of its capacity to go within and face not just the happy, I'm a generous person kind of thoughts, but the darker aspects of life. The 4 knows how to embrace its sadness and sorrow, its grief and its anger, its spite. And in doing so, as the 2 moves into that, it allows wholeness to happen. An embracing of the totality of what is human. Because here, when we say you are beautiful and you're whole, it's not because you're only love and light, but because you're all of this, just perfectly, wonderfully human and rich in the diversity of your inner experience. And so as the 2 embraces what feels like total selfishness, it moves into a deeper space inside itself that honors, okay, now that I'm actually being selfish, I'm starting to honor my own needs. And look, I'm manipulating other people less now because I don't need from them as much. But I'm actually operating from this organic whole place within myself. And lo and behold, where is the source and fount of all creativity? Oh, the 4s have got creativity in spades, right? Why? Because creativity is from the inside out. What is yours to be and to do and to color the world with comes from this capacity not to be looking always outward to what others want, to be mirrored back, but to look inward, explore that infinite space. And how is this more than just psychological, but also deeply spiritual? When we go inside ourselves, at least from a unity perspective, we meet God. We meet God in the mystery of the darkness that is unknown to us, in the consciousness that is bigger than ourselves. In 12 step, they call it your higher power. We call it light, love. But it is that which is unknown to the personality. And so the 2 giving itself permission to move within, to move inside, to feel these negative feelings, to feel not so much like I'm just this great, kind, giving person, allows the two to reach into this wholeness. And often twos that integrate, I've seen time and time again produce music, like Victor up there, produces art not just formally, but in the way that organic expression happens in the world as art, right? It's expressing yourself from the inside out, not in reaction to what someone else needed. And so that deception I mentioned earlier from the two it's not like an explicit lying, but it's more of like a kind of covering over of, it's only a responding to what you think is needed out there rather than a deep, authentic expression of what is in here. And so the beauty of the two that starts to integrate and embody these luscious qualities of the four is that in our world we find real humanitarians who are no longer giving to get, right? But also there's this depth of creativity that has always been there that creates this richness of life. And so we get to, and I know most twos need this, twos integrating and finding your wholeness serves the world because it enables you to play your vital part in being who you are. This idea that in the unity of life, it is vital that each of us claim our roles and become fully ourselves in service to the world, because I believe the world needs our authentic selves to be there, to be visible. And Brené Brown has this wonderful quote. Oh, there it is already. Don't shrink, don't puff up, just stand your sacred ground. So the two's vice, the vice of the two is actually pride. No two likes to hear that. But in the beginning, it is this sense that I'm proud that I'm kind of better than all of you, and I can help you get your needs met, right? I don't have needs. But as you start to own it, there's a natural movement toward the virtue of the two, which is humility. And in humility, there's a balance. You are not more important than I am, and I am not more important than you are. And I don't have to be bigger and be made special in order to already be special. I can just be right-sized, right? Don't shrink, don't puff up. And so in that, we find realness, authenticity, not just for the two, but within all of us in the ways that we can connect to. How do we have a need to be especially something? And how does that need come from actually not knowing that we are already intrinsically valuable? That rose was gifted to us. And so long as we seek out there for it, we're not actually claiming what's right here. That we can release our guilt and kind of come into this deeper knowing. So I'll close and open us in a time of meditation by sharing, not all of these quotes are up there, but it feels very important to me to share this kind of longer quote about the personality from The Kingdom Within. Although the ego is the center of conscious life, human beings also have a vast unconscious life, which we may call the inner world. Here, there is a center to the personality that includes the whole self, whereas the ego is only the center of consciousness. This whole self is in each of us as a potentiality and seeks to be realized in the life process. Our dreams express the urge to realization of the whole person within us and give us insight into this inner world of which we are ordinarily unaware. And in order for the realization of the whole personality to take place, however, the ego must come into a creative relationship with the inner life and be constantly expanding in order to give greater and greater expression to the whole scope of personality. Again, this is from John Sanford's The Kingdom Within. And so, the message of the two that is important to all of us is the message of noticing how we continually look into the outer world for the sense of our own wholeness and worth, to reflect back to us who we are. And that if instead of that, we were willing to probe the inner self, which inevitably contains more than that love and that light, that generosity that is on the surface of being. It contains some of the darker feelings and emotions, and be willing to lovingly and gently embrace that within us. And to understand that something transforms here in Unity. We believe that we are fundamentally good, but we don't trust that. We think if we start to embrace selfishness, we would just become selfish people. So we never journey in to that place where transformation takes place. To do that, however, it's important, it's vital that we learn this not just from our heads, right? Because in our heads, we have these thoughts about selfish and not selfish. But when we're willing to go within and release our own ideas to a consciousness greater than ourselves, which some of us call God, then something transforms on our behalf. We don't have to do that work. We surrender what we needed to be. We surrender our self-concept gently, compassionately, and we go into the silence. And even as the head talks and the thoughts go in the silence, so long as we're willing to not believe them all and kind of sink back into the space within ourselves that is empty, that is actually full of God, full of love, full of truth, that we allow that mystery to teach us who we really are. And as you bring your attention gently back into the space of our togetherness, if you feel comfortable doing so, I invite you to bring your hands together in front of your hearts, being connected to that special place in your heart for yourself, honoring your value, not above others, not below others, but it just is. And so it is. Amen.